Hello and welcome to the Grab Bag. This is a brand new YouTube channel that I've started. I've got a couple other ones, but I'm going to pour most of my attention into this one now. Call it Grab Bag for a reason. It's going to be a multitude of topics that we're going to discuss. These are topics that I feel very comfortable discussing, very confident in. Topics that I've done a lot of research about. And hopefully these are topics that will interest you. And topics generally are going to be of politics to a certain degree. I don't like to get too deep in the weeds with politics because it's so divisive. And I don't want to make that this kind of show. Religion, same thing. But there's some historical facts that we're going to delve into that I think really, truly need to be discussed. Sports, ufology. I'm very into ufology. If you don't know what that is, that's the study of UFOs, extraterrestrials, things of that nature. Now, with that said, I think it's very important that we keep an open mind. An open mind as a listener, as a viewer, as a parent, as a friend, as a coworker. We're so quick these days to shut people out. And I think that that's problematic in our society and societies across the world. So let's try to keep an open mind. And if you're incapable of doing that, that's okay. This podcast is not for you. Now, with that said, let's delve right into today's topic, and that's a single person, and his name is Corey Goode. If you don't know who Corey Goode is, I encourage you to look him up. There's all kinds of YouTube videos. He's got a website, the Sphere Being Alliance. Corey's story is quite phenomenal. He's got a phenomenal story to tell, and I hope you can listen to him with that same open mind. Now, quite frankly, when I heard his story, I was a little skeptical myself. And it's a story that's so far out there that upon the first listen, I'd say that it's a difficult one to absorb. And his story, quite honestly, is just one of those stories that kind of made me sit back and think, am I being open-minded here? Because the more I delved into his story, the more I realized that this guy, I think he's telling the truth. I really do. Corey's story is that he claims to have been part of a program called the MyLab program. It's a governmental program where they take young kids and they do these testings. Now, keep in mind, I'm 50 years old. I'll be 50 in July. And I remember back when I was in the 3rd, 4th grade, we did do a lot of testing for the government. And they did this under the guise of checking intelligence levels and things of that nature, and to see how far you had progressed. They don't do it quite as much these days because they're so monitored anymore that they don't really need to have special testing for it. So Corey's story is that he was part of this program, and then he got into it at the age of 6. And he started, I think it was 1976 to 1987. So he was in there for about 11 years. Now, within these 11 years, from 76 to 87, he was put into a program that allowed for what they call intuitive empaths. And what an intuitive empath is, the ability to get into the psychological part of the brain that allows you to see things, okay? And they call this remote viewing. Now, again, I need you to listen to this whole podcast so you understand the entire context of it. Rolling your eyes right now may not be the best thing for you until you hear that everything that I have to say about this. So please listen to the entire podcast. And when you do remote viewing, basically what you are is you're put in a room and you connect to yourself in a part of the brain that a lot of us just don't have. All right. And that's why they did this testing for the MyLab program, to find out who it is that actually has the ability to remote view. Now, what Corey was able to do was he was able to go to places that the government could not go, and it wasn't feasible to get there. Places such as the far side of the moon, or the dark side of the moon, if you will. Now, when I say keep an open mind, and I say make sure you listen to the entire podcast, there's a reason. Because a lot of these things have been qualified. A lot of the things that Corey said have been verified and ratified by some recent articles that have came out. Some recent documents that were previously classified, excuse me. Now, Corey is claimed to be taken many times to this place called the Secret Space Program. I shouldn't say a place. I should say a program, if you will. The Secret Space Program is where they take intuitive empaths and other people that have something to bring to the table that allow for the ability to provide a service to the Secret Space Program. Corey, in his stay with the Secret Space Program, he was allowed to take trips. Not remote viewing, but actually physically going places. And we're talking about places within our solar system, but in the far reaches of that solar system. And these places that they would go had a federation of extraterrestrial beings, and they were part of a federation or a council. And this council voted on things. They discussed topics about where they are within the solar system, where they are within a lot of parts of our lives. And when I say our, I'm referring to people on Earth, Earthlings, if you will. And he came across a gentleman who kind of, from what I understand, took him under his wing. And this gentleman was known as a blue avian. And there's pictures of this gentleman. His name is Ra-Tir-Air. Ra-Tir-Air was very good to Corey. Kind of helped him out because Corey was he was the only human in this council to be a part of it. As a matter of fact, I remember him telling a story where he actually had to get up in front of this council of beings and discuss things. And they were not very friendly to him. They felt as though the human was kind of beneath them. And Ra-Tir-Air made sure that Corey was heard and made sure he was a part of things. If the name Ra-Tir-Air sounds familiar, Ra-Tir-Air is, the first name is obviously Ra. Ra is also known as the sun god, but he's also known as a part of a book called The Law of One. And if you're not familiar with The Law of One, I encourage you to look that up too. It's quite a read. It has a lot to do with intuitive empath, if you will, but it's more psychic, medium type related. This woman laid on a bed for a few hours and had discussions where she would spit out what Ra was saying to her. And what Ra was saying to her was a lot of subjects about densities and distortions. You know, I guess let me discuss what I mean when I say densities. According to Ra, there are different densities. In other words, different levels, if you will, that each living thing is a part of. For instance, the first density is just awareness. The second density is growth. And if I understand it correctly, I believe that the second density is things like plants and animals, for the most part. And then you have the third density. And third density is self-awareness, which is where we're at. Most of us are at. And then you have some fourth density beings that are on Earth. But the fourth density is self-awareness of the conscious and the spirit. And that is a whole new level of love. And, there's a lot to be said for that. Yeah, because I think there's a lot of third density people here. And I think it's important that we all try to strive to reach that fourth density. Now, again, keep in mind that when I read The Law of One, it was, another big pill to swallow, if you will, because it's a lot of information. It's a lot packed into one thing, and when you read it, it's so hard-hitting that, oh, by the way, there is a YouTube video, excuse me, there is a YouTube video out there where it just reads the whole book to you. So it's a book on audio, and you can follow along and read along with it. But at any rate, it's just like when you hear the story of the MyLab program. These things are, when you first take it in, because of the way that we're conditioned, it's so hard to absorb. It's so hard to understand as a human being because we have limitations. It's so hard to understand everything at once. So I recommend that you even with this podcast, this video here, if you listen to it more than once, it becomes a lot easier to comprehend. It becomes a lot easier to digest. So I encourage you to do that. The same thing with the book of The Law of One. The same thing with Corey Goode's story, the MyLab program, Secret Space program, the Blue Avians, which is what Ra-Tir is. So I encourage you to kind of reread, research, re-listen, and then you'll get the idea that I think you will, that what Corey Goode has to say, what the Law of One has to say, there's a lot of validity to that, and it's something that I truly believe that if we as human beings truly listen to it, absorb it, and ultimately live it, this is such a better place to live. Love is a very underrated emotion. The more we love, the more we listen. The more we listen, the better connected we can become as a human race. Not as a white race or a black race or a brown race, yellow race, whatever. It's so important for us to listen to each other. A lot of our beliefs are built on geography, and that's a topic I'm gonna delve into in a future podcast. But without love, we've got nothing, man. We've got nothing. So please be tolerant of others. Listen to others. They have a story to tell too. And the more we listen, the more connected we become. Now, as many of you may know, President Barack Obama released, or had the FBI and CIA released, 13 million documents that were previously classified. Now, 13 million, and this was released, 4 or 5 months ago? That's a lot of documents to read, and I don't think anybody's gone through them completely yet. One thing that we have discovered is the admission that there have been remote viewers brought into programs through the U.S. government. Now, let's think about this a second. 4 or 5 months ago, these documents were released. 5 years ago, Corey Goode reached out to David Wilcock and telling him all of these stories about remote viewing and things of that nature. Now, we come to a fork in the road here, don't we? Either Corey Goode has a very, very high level, top secret government official that he's very good friends with, that this official has shared this information with him about, or Corey Goode's telling the truth. I am pretty sure it's the latter. It's tough belief that, he would have been privy to this information. Very tough. Remote viewings of, say, the dark side of the moon or the far side of the moon, if you will. These have been documented. They were classified. Now they're unclassified. And there have been claims by people in the past, other than Corey Goode. So there's a gentleman named Ingo Swann. Ingo Swann was documented as being part of a remote viewing of the far side of the moon. And what he claimed is that he saw structures on the far side of the moon. By the way, let me back up here a second, just in case you're not aware. As the Earth rotates, as does the moon, and it rotates at the exact same rotation speed. And because of that, and it makes you wonder why and how that is, but it could be science, but for it to be that exact is thought-provoking. For those rotations to be spinning at the exact same for all of these years is quite fascinating, at the least. But at any rate, I digress. So he's claiming that on the far side of the moon, which we can't see ever, that he sees alien structures, extraterrestrial structures, with comings and goings of spacecraft. This is well documented. And if you remember Edgar Mitchell, who was an astronaut, and he just passed away at age 85, he said that when they left back in the ship to leave the moon to come back to Earth, that he saw things in there that were frightening. He saw spacecraft flying to the dark side of the moon. There's a lot of coincidence here. An awful lot of coincidence. As a matter of fact, you can look up on YouTube, you can look up a plethora of videos that show craft flying across the moon. I mean, it's a deluge of craft flying across the moon. There are plenty of YouTube. Just look up moon spacecraft, and you'll find them. They're all over. And yeah, might as well talk about this. There are a lot of disingenuous people out there that have videos on YouTube that, quite frankly, are just it's terrible that they're doing some of the CGI that they're doing, because basically what it does is it takes away from the truth. But at any rate, you'll notice that on a lot of these videos, especially the videos of the moon with the craft traveling across, that this is not CGI by any stretch. It would be too difficult to do what they're doing with it. So back to Corey Goode. If you believe him, which again I do, this is what you would believe. That raw-tier air comes from a group called the Blue Avians, that they look like human hybrids of a human and a bird, and fully equipped with feathers, mainly blue, with a little bit of a yellow tint feather at the top, and that raw-tier air explained to Corey that they're part of an alliance. And this alliance apparently is protecting human beings. Earth is a very unique place. It's not so unique that it's the only one, but it is a unique place nonetheless. It has water, it has a tremendous atmosphere. It's a rich in resources. And there are malevolent beings out there that would like to move in. And that's a scary thought just in itself. If you think about it, they could either, possibly make us slaves or just wipe us out. Either way, it's not good for us. And there are entities out there that are truly looking out for our best interests. So none of the members of the Federation want to harm us, but at the same time, they're also not ready for full disclosure, at least up until now. And that's because they don't want to inject anything into our cultures, and they're very standoffish when it comes to injecting themselves into our world. They have no interest in doing that. And so thus far, they've really rejected the idea of being involved in any type of, full disclosure. And that's because they have laws that forbid them to do so. Again, according to Corey Goode, this is what he had to say. So, and then another thing is that Corey Goode has stated as of late that there's some rethinking going on when it comes to that. When it comes to the idea of helping us with full disclosure. The mainly the Blue Avians are interested at possibly getting into that within the next 10 to 12 years or so. And the reason being is because there's a lot of malevolent forces, not just within the universe, but right here on Earth. And they're part of a cabal, a very dark cabal. And when you think about world power and not just financial, just world power, there's it's very seductive, and it brings in a lot of very, very dark people. And these people have been known to interact with some less than reputable beings that are extraterrestrial, but are on Earth. And you may have known about some of these, like the reptilians. They are walking among us. They have bases underground. They have bases in Antarctica. And I'm not just referring, I'm not just referring to the reptilians. I'm referring to all types of beings. And if you haven't heard, Antarctica is a bit of a hotbed for extraterrestrial beings. And as a matter of fact, Corey Goode did a remote viewing of Antarctica, and it showed that, according to Corey Goode, it showed him that there were these structures, and ultimately he ended up traveling there and visiting these structures. And some of the things that he saw was just fascinating. And Corey has been claiming for quite some time about these structures in Antarctica. And it's came out now that there's been a number of government workers and Air Force pilots that have claimed that there's a hole. There's a big giant hole at the South Pole where they can see craft flying in and out of. As a matter of fact, if you don't believe that, this you have to believe. There's a no-fly zone over this hole. It's an absolute no-fly zone. You will be shot down instantaneously if you ever attempt to fly over this hole. The hole's real. You can look into that yourself. I promise you it's real. And there's also images. You can pull up on Google Earth of some oddly looking shaped structures. And one of them, and it's kind of it almost looks like a dome. And it looks like it has beams that fortify this dome. And it's got snow over the top of it, but you can clearly make out the dome. I mean, it's and you can clearly make out the beams, if you will, whatever type of facility it's built out of. I don't know if it's aluminum or whatever, but you can make out within that structure on Google Images that it's clearly some sort of facility. Now, I know I've packed in a lot of information into this program. And I know it's, again, getting back to what I said earlier, it's a lot to digest. But if you keep an open mind and you do your own research with that open mind and listen, I think you would almost have to come to the conclusion that what Corey Goode has to say and has said in the past, there's a lot of validity to it at the very least. And I know there's going to be a lot of comments, and there's always, you have your shills and your trolls that that want to be the smartest person in the room and shoot down everything that you say. And when you stop listening, you stop growing. And quite frankly, the government feeds on people like you. And I'm not pointing my finger at you, but you got to listen. You got to listen. There's a lot to be said for this stuff. And earlier I have said to you that, a lot of our beliefs are based on geography. I mean, you think about it. In France, 2007, completely opened up all of their files containing anything to do with UFOs. Canada, Great Britain, Russia. They've opened up a lot of documentation showing us that this is real, it exists. And living in the United States, which is where I'm at, we are shut out on a great many of things, not just UFOs or extraterrestrials, on a great many things. And that's very unfortunate. But this is based on geography. And today's show is not about religion. But let me give you an idea of what I'm trying to refer to. So if you are from the United States, or you're from Europe, actually not even the United States, the Americas, or you're from Europe, you're probably, if you're religious, you're a Christian. If you're from the Middle East, you're most likely going to be a Muslim. If you're from India, you're going to be a Hindu. And every one of these situations where you have your diehard Christians, you have your diehard Muslims, you have your diehard Hindus, they will die. They will fall on that sword just as quick as you can say it. If it comes down to their beliefs. And that is so sad. But it's all based on geography. Because it's what their parents have told them. And their church told them. And their great-grandparents told them. And their great-grandparents told them. And so on. And this is going on for millennia. This is all learned behaviors. Well, so is the idea of UFOs and extraterrestrials. These are learned behaviors to shut it out. Because the 6 o'clock news told you to. Being the smartest person in the room and $1 will get you a cup of coffee at McDonald's and nothing else. Let's listen. Let's be a part of something. Let's be part of a movement that of a new generation of people that grow together. Let's quit putting up all these walls and these fences and begin to listen to each other. And I'm going to close with a quote from Socrates that I always loved. And it's all thinking begins with wondering. And think about that. Till next time, I will see you soon, and I appreciate you watching. And before I go, I'm sorry. I plan on bringing high-quality content to this show. And I want to have some guest phone calls, possibly in-studio guests, and things of that nature. That requires funding. And I'm not asking you to fund. I'm not starting a GoFundMe page or anything like that. But please, I'm asking you very kindly to please like, subscribe, and share. Even though YouTube's got some things going on right now, we're hoping that when the dust settles, they'll come to their senses and allow some for advertising for programs like mine. And so please like, subscribe, and share. And the more we can do this, the better the content and the quality of the show that I can bring to you. All right. Thanks, everybody. Peace out.